Hi, welcome back. Wow, I didn't think you'd make it. I didn't think you'd want to come back after last time. I got a little crazy. It got a little nutso. And today, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to talk about working with actors. Let's set the stage. As you progress along your directing career, you're going to notice that more and more tasks on set are being delegated to your crew members who are more talented than you are. Before, you had your fingerprints on every light stand and camera setting and every little detail of the shoot. You were lifting and making it happen, and now you're surrounded by people doing all those things for you. And so you're left with one frightening reality. You've got one job and you can't screw it up. So as a director, you've already done 90% of your job in pre-production. You've set the vision from the top down and you've communicated that to your department heads, and you've gotten your buy-in from all the stakeholders, and you have a plan that you know can work, and you've got fallback plans. Everything is done in pre-production. So showing up to set is a formality, but there's still that 10% that you need to stick on set, and that is working with your actors. And so for this video, we're gonna group actors into three really broad, somewhat arbitrary groups, but we can break it down from there and talk about how your approach might change depending on the kind of actor you're working with. So our three categories are novice actors, commercial actors, and narrative actors. Seems simple enough, so let's get into it. Novice actors, oh yeah. So novice, I learned how to direct working with novice actors, sometimes non-actors. The skills that you pick up on when working with novice actors really don't apply to when you're working with, more experienced actors in the commercial or narrative spaces. And so that's the first thing to know, is that the thing that got you here isn't necessarily the thing that's gonna get you there. Just keep that in mind. And so when you're working with these novice actors or non-actors, how do you even get a directable performance? Is that even possible at all? Well, online, I've seen a lot of advice and videos about how you can care for your actors, make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe. You want them to feel like everything is under control and it's okay if they mess up. And I think those videos are good, and they're coming from people with more experience than me. But really, my first piece of advice is just make them laugh. Just let them forget about all the lights and all the complication in the schedule and how they look, and all that hyper self-awareness will make anyone feel rigid. And so you need them to kind of lose that perfect posture, lose that perfect angle. You just need them to relax and bring a more authentic self, because that's really the first thing that they're gonna be able to tap into, is just who they are. And I think laughter is a great way to get to that, especially if you're funny. If not, let them laugh at you, you're not perfect, you're a piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit. Whatever you can do to lower the stakes, to lower all of the formality. So really, the two things after that is to keep your feedback, short, concise, and simple, and to be adaptive. And that requires paying attention to your actors, what they can respond to and what they can't, and what they're struggling with and what comes naturally. So I have a few methods when a novice actor is struggling with delivery. First thing is, you can always rely on spatial instruction, okay? You need to be clear. Hey, I need you to land here. You're going to look up for a beat, look down, sift through something, turn around, and deliver your line. Those are very, actionable instructions, and it's good to have those down, maybe. However, sometimes your actor can become rigid because of this detailed instruction. While it's good to keep those things in mind for timing, especially for, you've got a 15-second spot you need to make, but you'll find that prescribing them detailed feedback like that will actually often result in a rigid, forced performance. So when that isn't working, sometimes I'll then pivot to more of a motivation-based instruction. So an example could be, hey, you're frantic, I need you to come in here, you're gonna sift through some of these items on the shelf, you have so many things going on in your mind, it's just like chaos, and then you turn. That is just kind of getting them more in like the tone of the scene. If all else fails, you wouldn't do this with, more experienced actors, but you could always just show them how it's done. And sometimes they just need to see it in order for it to click, okay? And that could be because, one, I'm giving them poor instruction or poorly phrased instruction, I'm struggling, so I just need to show them, and then, okay, now we can have a dialogue of action. Or Two, maybe you tried to deliver it for them and then you realize, I'm seeing what it's like from their shoes, like, hey, this is actually really awkward. How can we solve this? So I think it's a completely healthy form of communication to show them how it could be done. And in some ways it can reveal things that they're struggling with to you, and in other ways it can help it click and make sense for them. And so yeah, all that, you're finding what they're good at, what's natural to them, and embracing that, whether that requires detailed instruction or, a motivation-based approach, or just showing them how it's done. So, that's novice actors. Let's move on to commercial actors. So as I found myself in more and more commercial productions, I found myself working with more and more commercial actors. Now, these commercial actors, they know how to hit a mark, they know how to deliver, memorize lines. You say do the thing, and they will do the thing. So one of the ways that I like to work with commercial actors is I will kind of plot an axis of range for like a line delivery or an action. So we'll start rattling through some takes, or if we're smart, we'll do this in pre-production, where we'll start to explore some different tones and deliveries for a line. Maybe we're able to identify, hey, that's kind of like our mischievous, almost like our friend is letting you in on a secret delivery. Let's mark that and remember that. And let's explore something in a different direction. And then as you maybe work through a couple takes, you discover, hey, that is our peppy, poppy, very bright, positive delivery. Let's mark that, let's remember it. So now you've got these 2 points. One is really peppy and bright and commercial, and the other is a little bit more conversational, it has a little bit more edge to it, right? Now you can start to dial the actor in between those 2 points. So it becomes a very quick way to communicate with an actor, how bright something should be, or how much smirk something should have. And you can do this, in a bunch of different deliveries. Again, you can start dialing them in between that, and it helps them get through a lot of takes very quickly, and for you to keep track of, okay, what do I have from this actor? The one other thing I will recommend is, look, these commercial actors have been chiseled down. They've gone through literally countless auditions, client feedback and creative directors. And so you'll often find that while they're sharp, sometimes you're like, whoa, I'm not getting a very wide range. And I think that's honestly just because the industry, it encourages uniformity. You have to find a way to have them, feel psychologically safe to experiment a little and give you maybe an unusable take, but something that just kind of aggressively anchors, one of those points further out. I've done takes with actors, I have 16 takes, and on set, I feel like I'm working towards something. I'm like, okay, I think we're actually getting something really varied here. And then I get into post and everything feels identical. I realize that, I wasn't moving the needle as much as I thought I was. So hey, get a little crazy with it sometimes, okay? Okay, so that brings us to narrative actors. Now, as a commercial director, I've mostly worked with just commercials, and so I don't think I have the wealth of experience to, give you meaningful advice on how to work with narrative actors, at least nothing that you haven't heard before. But in the small taste that I've had, I have found that it's often useful to take that simple axis, that one-dimensional range of this point or this point of delivery, and add another axis of intention, of where is this line coming from? Now, obviously, in long-form narrative pieces, context is everything. You're gonna be working with your actor page to page to know, where they're at emotionally. What is the character thinking at this page and this page? Because, you're gonna be shooting things out of order, and so you're always gonna be keeping track of that context. But on a smaller scale, where does the line come from? Where does the delivery come from? So you could have a scene of dialogue where 2 friends are parting ways. So you could have one delivery, which is soft-spoken, teary delivery, and then you could have another one which is almost numb to the separation of those 2 characters. And then another axis is, does that come from a place of regret? Do they regret the things that they did to lead to this? Or does it come from a place of a resolution? Does it come from a place of they know that this is the only path forward? And so now you've got this little 2-dimensional graph where you can start, mapping their performances to, hey, this is a teary delivery coming from a place of regret, like I wish you could stay. Hey, this is a teary delivery coming from a place of this is bittersweet, this is happy, this is inevitable. Or then you have a numb delivery delivery that's coming from a place of regret, like the entire friendship is flashing before their eyes. Or you have one that's a numb performance that's coming from a place of finality, like there's nothing left to be said, and that's it, and maybe they feel a little indifferently. So already, there's so many branches that can come off from this 4-point grid of delivery. Conceivably, even with the same emotional context of every page that came before, there's different ways that this line can be delivered. Not every actor is gonna appreciate a rigid tool set like that. Some actors don't even want to rehearse at all. This is, at least in your own mind, a little bit of a framework when you want to do yourself a favor and give yourself some options. If that's what you want, or just let the actor do their thing because you've shared your vision and you trust them. That's always fun. You ever try that? Just trusting your actors? It can be pretty tough. I'm full of anxiety. It's so hard to trust actors. I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure you're better than me. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, I hate to say it, that most of this advice really probably doesn't apply to you. This isn't industry knowledge, this isn't from a book. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about my personal experience. My entire journey here has been an exercise of trial and error. And so really my best advice, the most relevant advice for you, would be to create your own exercise of trial and error. Every time, ask yourself what worked and what didn't. What did you find that was unexpected, and was it good or was it bad? And be really honest with yourself about how that went and what worked and what didn't. And then be ready to evolve and change when you work with a new tier of actors, or in anything with directing, when you go from putting up all the lights yourself to then working with a cinematographer or a gaffer and crew. And so your tool set is constantly evolving as you do. These YouTube videos, we create categories and we try to break it down in some sort of structured way, but that's really just for our purposes of trying to share something with you that we're struggling to communicate. Yeah, I broke it down into 3 categories. You might think of working with actors completely differently. You may see other videos that talk about working with actors in a completely different way, but really I think the most informative thing is just what works for you, your experience. And so it's a cliche advice of, go out there and get to shooting. But I know you can do it. I believe in you. And yeah, really my last piece of advice, if you're a director, learn how to edit. Become an editor. Oh my gosh, that's gonna make you such a better director. Think about it, if you know how you're gonna edit, if you know what you need to edit a good scene together, you could either, 1, focus on making the perfect little sandwich, and every little ingredient has to be great for your little acting sandwich. Or, if you know how to edit, you just cater a whole buffet worth of takes. And then in the edit, that's when you're actually directing. That's when you have your range. I know, look, and when you get really, really good and you know exactly what you want, then you can start really drilling in and just perfecting the only one thing that the director needs. But really, until then, think about that buffet. You wanna have a buffet when you're editing, okay? So that's our video about working with actors. I'd love to hear methods that you picked up on when working with actors and why those things work for you. And stay tuned for the next video. The next video is gonna be crazy. I don't know what it's gonna be yet, but it's gonna be crazy. Okay, until next time, I'm Nathan, and I'll see you then.